What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest edition of No Mercy with Stephen A. Smith, yours truly, coming at you as I love to do several times a week. Remember, wherever you can find your free podcast, you can find No Mercy with Stephen A. Smith. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. We're here in Los Angeles, California, but it doesn't matter where I'm at. I'm always thankful to our official studio sponsor, FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is the official sports betting company of the No Mercy podcast. You know, I'm going to make this quick because I've got somebody that everybody needs to hear. If you're a parent, you need to hear this. If you're someone who loves children, you need to hear this. If you're someone like most of our society who's incredibly protective of the most innocent amongst us, which are our children, you should listen to this interview that I'm about to do. From 2016 to 2018, we learned heinous, grotesque details of a former doctor from the University of Michigan State named Larry Nassar. He hovered over the gymnastics team at Michigan State. And essentially, he ended up being accused and confronted by more than 150 women who said he sexually abused them from the time they were 7, 8, 9 years old. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison back in 2018. So for all intended purposes, he will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars, hopefully in the basement of jail cells with the sodomites, for crying out loud, as far as I'm concerned. That's how disgusting of a human being I think this man is. Nevertheless, there are a bevy of victims that he left in his wake. One of those people probably wouldn't describe herself as a victim because she was one of the people that helped bring his transgressions to light. She was one of the people that used to be a gymnast for him, a former competitive gymnast. She's recognized as the first victim of Larry Nassar, the disgraced doctor of the women's Olympic gymnastics team. Now, as a high-powered attorney and through her experience working on some of the country's highest profile cases, she's become a leading voice on sexual abuse and other legal issues, speaking out on television, radio, and in print media. And before I introduce you to her, just remember this one nugget of information. Murderers who are in jail, rapists, and all sorts of heinous criminals. You know the one thing most of them have in common, where it's widely understood? If you are an abuser of children, even what some would term the lowest of the low rise up against you, because it's almost universally understood. Of course, there's exceptions to every rule with some of these sick, demented people in our society. But for the most part, it's pretty close to universally understood. You don't mess with children. Larry Nassar did just that. And because of that, he'll be spending the rest of his natural life in prison. And one of the people who spearheaded the movement and the legal case against him that left him incarcerated for the rest of his life is Miss Sarah Klein. Again, the first victim of Larry Nassar. She's up next, right here on No Mercy, with yours truly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk to you about an amazing place. We're talking about Etsy. We're talking about a place where you can find rugs, sofas, jackets, wall art, jewelry, furniture, all in one online marketplace. And the best part, you're supporting independent sellers and the beautiful items they make. Etsy has items for all budgets and any occasion. You might be going holiday shopping for your significant other, or you might want to buy your child a gift to bring to their teacher. Whatever it is, guess what? They've got it. I know they had it for me. I was looking for some furniture for my new crib. I found it. I found a beautiful sofa, beautiful coffee table next to it. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I bought it, damn it. And I had a good time with it, okay? New to Etsy, use the code NEW for 10% off your first purchase. That's code NEW. Maximum discount value of $50. Offer ends June 30th, 2023. See terms at etsy.com/terms. For home style and gifts, shop etsy.com. That's ETSY.com. Guess what, y'all? Etsy has it. I'm going to let y'all all in on a little secret here, okay? I want to go gluten-free. I'm not there yet, but I'm aiming to get there, okay? And that's why I'm so thankful that Green Chef exists. Some of us are trying to live healthy lifestyles, you know. Some of us need to live certain dietary lifestyles, whether due to an allergy or a particular preference. And that's why a lot of people, including myself, are thankful for Green Chef. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well with meals that fit every lifestyle. Keto, check. Vegan, check. Gluten-free, check. All made possible because they bring you 30-plus recipes every week. I'm talking sesame ginger chicken for you keto and gluten-free folks. I'm licking my fingers right now after that last bite because that pan sauce, is so good. Let me tell you something. And their meals are protein-packed, if you so choose. 3 items each week. In their newest collection, have an average of 40 grams of protein per serving. Greek chicken salad, enchilada spiced turkey bowls. If you want to bulk, they've got the protein. This is me telling you to shake off that winter slump and start spring by eating well with some delicious recipes. Go to greenchef.com/mercy60 and use code MERCY60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. That's greenchef.com/mercy60 and use code MERCY60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. My guest today is a former Team USA gymnast and the first known abuse survivor of the team's doctor, Larry Nassar. She is now a high-profile attorney representing several other victims of sexual abuse. Please welcome a crusader in every sense of the word, the one and only Sarah Klein. And how are you? How's everything?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here with you.
I'm so happy to have you. Let's start off by using that word crusader. How do you feel when you hear that word to describe yourself?
In a way, I feel a little bit uncomfortable because I feel so humbled to have been given this platform. I recognize that, the Nassar case was huge. And in a sense, we got something that most survivors will never get, which is a platform, the media reporting our story, getting it out there. We have our perpetrator behind bars. And that almost never happens in these cases. So I feel very humbled by that. And I also feel humbled by the fact that I get to represent survivors who I meet in a place of, in some instances, living catastrophic lives, living out the chaos of what happened to them and getting to walk them through the legal system and literally see them change as human beings as we take on the entities and the people who harmed them. So all in all, I'm grateful for what I get to do. And it's been a huge part of my personal healing process.
Your personal healing process, I imagine the healing is never complete. But could you put into perspective for our viewers, our listeners, where are you at specifically in the healing process when you consider all that this despicable individual, yes, I'll say that about him, subjected you to?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I am very careful to present myself in a way that is authentic and real. So people look at me and they say, she's strong and she, is a lawyer and she's taking on all these people and she looks like she has it all together. In many respects, not to give myself a pat on the back, but I do. I lead a full, life. I love my career. I have two beautiful daughters. Life is good, but I also want to present the side where I have my bad days too. I still go to therapy. I have a trauma therapist. It's one of those things where those scars are marked on your body for life, but it's sort of a question of what do you do with them? And do you have that support system around you when you do have those bad days? So it's always a work in progress. And I never want anybody to think, because I'm not like her, I'll never be okay. What you see is not always reality. And I have my bad days too, for sure.
Respectfully, I asked this question. Could you please highlight for folks what is a bad day like for Sarah Klein and for people who've suffered the way that you've suffered? What illustrate for us what a bad day entails?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, for example, in January, one of the major networks did a huge profile piece on me that included video of me as a child that I had never seen before. And it's all set to music, and it's the story of a survivor who comes out the other side. And it was beautiful. And I look forward to sharing that with my kids someday. On the other hand, it was a moment of like, this was your life, and I never get used to it. So when I saw it all put together, it was devastating. It's such a sad story, and sort of reliving it and viewing these videos of me as a 7 or 8 or 10-year-old child was really hard. So for a good week, I didn't feel like doing anything. I cried. I didn't want to get out of bed. I had to grieve once again the childhood that I had, and work through that with the help of my support team. But a bad day is having to sort of relive some of the trauma that occurred, and I suspect I'll live with that forever. But I don't let it take me down. I do get back up eventually. I do dust myself off, and I get back at it.
Just to, educate our viewers and listeners, Larry Nasser, former gymnastics coach, I'm sorry, he's a disgraced doctor of the women's Olympic gymnastic team, obviously was working at Michigan State. This is a man that was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison back in 2018. You were among more than 150 women who confronted Nasser at his trial, obviously, which greatly assisted in him being convicted. Most of Nasser's enablers still have never been brought to justice, including Coach John Geddert, who took his own life in 2021 after being charged with 24 felonies. I just want to crystallize that for our viewers and listeners here. Let me get to you specifically with this regard. The abuse, according to you, began when you were 8 years old. But you've said you didn't even recognize it until you were in your 30s. Explain that for folks who may not understand or how that came to be, how you reached that conclusion. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. That's the number one question I get. I have a daughter who's 7.5. She is so innocent. She's still figuring out, how to write in cursive and read chapter. But I mean, she's so innocent. And that was the age I was when I first met this adult who came into our gym. We were told, you have to go back to this back room and you have to be treated by this athletic trainer. He was not even a doctor or in medical school yet at Michigan State University. And so we go back there, and he's kind, he's loving, he's friendly, he's warm. And, that in and of itself is part of the grooming technique. Kids loved him. I equate him to like a Labrador puppy, like kind of nerdy, goofy, silly, sweet. And you contrast that with what was going on in the gym, which was the verbal, physical abuse of our coach, John Geddert, who you just spoke about, who on the day he was supposed to show up to his arraignment after 24 counts of child abuse was committed suicide. He did not want to face the music. So I say often, like, he beat our little tiny child psyches down into thinking I lived in fear and trepidation all the time. I would
Wow.
throw up before practice. And so then you're sent back to this nice guy who's throwing all these medical terms out there. My 7.5-year-old wouldn't know. When I bring her to the doctor takes a strep, throat exam. And that's because I told her to and the doctor told her to. You know what I
Right.
mean? Children
Yeah.
innately trust adults.
I'm just wondering because I'm sitting there. I'm like, I remember reading up that when the story first came to light, you had teammates who actually flew in to support Larry Nasser. They actually flew in to support him and refused to believe the accusations. I'm like, how is that possible? How's that possible that you could be highlighting all of this stuff and they wouldn't even acknowledge it? They wouldn't even believe you. Talk to me about that.
I think athletics sometimes, especially certain teams or certain cultures, I equate them to like a cult-like atmosphere. And you don't speak out against the cult leaders, right? And so they hear this news about Larry. They're going, no, no, that was medical. He loves us. He knows, he knows us. He loves us. We went to his wedding. We love our coach, John Geddert. They fly in, they console him, and they verbally assault on social media those of us who come out against him. And coming out against my coach was even worse. Like my friendships with my teammates dissolved after that. How dare you speak out against him? And I wasn't making that up. He was charged by the Michigan Attorney General with
That's right.
24 counts of abuse, right? It
Right.
was not until Nasser's hard drive was peeled out of his garbage can, about to go out to the trash dump. A female cop got a warrant, pulled out that hard drive, and found 37,000 images of child pornography, including that of Larry Nassar's own children, that
Wow.
those teammates put their tails between their legs. But it's interesting psychologically. Why do people immediately defend their heroes? They don't know
Right.
what their heroes are doing. They don't know what they're doing in their private time or on their computer. He was viewing child pornography and making child pornography with his own kids. But immediately the psyche goes to his defense, because if they didn't, the paradigm of their childhood blows up. And we fight to try to keep what we think we know together, so that we don't have to face that we might have been wrong or something bad might have happened to us also.
So that's a rationale to explain what their thinking was at that particular moment in time. But once the truth was clear, what did they do then, Sarah? Did they come to you? Did they apologize? Did they give you a bunch of mea culpas? Did they own and fess up to their ignorance or their denial, whatever word is appropriate there? What did they do once that stuff was found out about Larry Nasser?
Some of my old teammates came forward as victims themselves. They weren't the ones that were harassing me. The ones that called me a liar and, tried to burn me down on social media have never spoken to me ever again. Even after Coach John, killed himself on the side of the road, nobody ever called me, apologized, whatever. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I know the truth. The world knows the truth, and I'm good with that.
I'd be fine with it too. You don't need them. You don't need them at all, Sarah. You're better off without them. I ask you this though: how did you feel when Coach Geddert, you learned that he had committed suicide? What kind of emotion was going through your mind? I imagine on one hand, you're furious because you're like, you wanted him to face justice. On the other hand, some people would say, good riddance. The good Lord would deal with you. There's a hell reserved for you someplace, somewhere. Where did your emotions lie?
I think right square in the middle. I wanted nothing more for him to be charged for years. And when it finally happened, I went on lots of morning news shows and talked about how we felt vindicated and the truth is coming out. And by that evening, I was doing interviews on the same shows talking about what it felt like. And it felt like a gut punch. In many ways, he was far, far worse than Larry Nassar. And I know that confuses certain people, but, at least with Nassar, I could somehow say pedophilia is a disease of the brain. And I, he's in prison the rest of his life. I could somehow, at least he was nice to me, even though he was sexually abusing me. John Geddert broke our little tiny psyches, broke our bodies, and he took pleasure in it. He was a masochist. He was the most cruel, arrogant, destructive human being that I've ever encountered. And in many respects, I hold him accountable for having given Nasser a platform in a back room where he would walk in, see us laying naked on a treatment table, not ask one question, not say a word. He had Nasser saw my cast off 2 times. I had surgery and had him saw my cast off 2 times so I could go back to compete to win medals. And people will say, I'd go back to my surgeon and he'd go, "What's going on?" And I think a lot of people's brain goes to where were the parents, which is another really important conversation to have in elite sports.
Right.
The goal is to separate the parents from the child.
Right.
They don't want them in the gym. They don't want them knowing what's going on there. They don't want them having any influence over the child. And so it's sort of, or at least it used to be sort of a wink, wink. You want your kid in the Olympics? You have to give me your kid. I'm going to travel with your kid. I'm going to tell you what's best for your kid. And we're going to talk about what your kid can eat and not eat. And then the kid is going, well, yeah, I want to be in the Olympics. I haven't given up my childhood for nothing, So it's not as simple as the parents failed the kids. I definitely understand that. And especially being a parent now, I'm like, I would never let my kid have done this. It was the 80s and 90s, at least in my experience. It was a different world. And B, in elite sports, parents are trained and groomed in a way to give their child up to the system, to Team USA, to take care of the child and get them to the Olympics.
In my world, although I'm covering a lot of sports, obviously primarily basketball is it. And you see a lot of parents who give you the impression, at the very least, they live vicariously through their kids. And so because of that, the upside to that is their involvement. Like you're a coach and you might be coaching the kid, but it's not like the parents are not watching. It's not like the parents are so removed and so detached that they wouldn't notice something that's going on. I see gymnastics based on what you described as being significantly different. Like literally give us your children. Your children are with us night and day. We will raise them for you. Is that an accurate depiction of how gymnastics can be, where it's not just about them coaching you? They're literally raising your kid to some degree because of the inordinate amount of time that a child has to spend away from their parents in order to train to be elite in the world of gymnastics. Is that an accurate depiction?
100% accurate. And the amount of travel and the amount of, different competitions and you're in the gym 30 to 40 hours a week. Your school schedule is altered because you're an Olympic hopeful, right? And so you're literally in the gym more than you're home, but somebody has to afford that. In my case, both of my parents worked and I had a brother, and so my parents couldn't sit there 30 or 40 hours a week. You do give they couldn't travel every weekend in abroad. There were instances where kids were sent overseas. Some of the Olympians that you've seen as part of this case, they were sent overseas with their coaches and their instructions from USA Gymnastics. If you have an emergency, call Larry Nassar. He's your chaperone, right? That was how it was set up. And we hear about the Caroli Ranch, Bella and Marta Caroli, some of the most famous coaches of all time. Yeah, of Mary Lou Retton and Kim Zmeskal and
Nadia Comaneci.
Comaneci, Dominique Moceanu, all of those girls, they had a physical location called the Caroli Ranch where parents had to send their children into the middle of nowhere, Texas, no phone calls, no contact, no parents allowed. It was a rule, no parents allowed on the ranch. If you did not go to the ranch, that was Team USA official training facility with a rule, no parents allowed. And if you don't go there, you don't advance.
So when we look at it from that perspective and we fast forward to the year 2023 and we see so many different things going on, so many different qualifications per se, lack of a better word, in terms of abuse. Sarah Klein, define for me in this day and age, if possible, your definition of abuse based on what you've experienced compared to how society has evolved, what we know about today. What would you define as abuse?
That is such a huge question because there are so many types of abuse. You know, we hear about domestic violence, trafficking, parental alienation, family court stuff. In my world, as a lawyer representing children in civil cases or who have been abused or adults who were abused as kids, it's either A, non-consensual, or B, abuse of power and harming children sexually under the guise of any kind of power dynamic. So in the doctor one is obvious under the guise of medical treatment, but let's take clergy abuse, for example, abusing the power in terms of a priest saying, I am the representative of God here on earth. And if you don't do what I say, you will go to hell, quite literally, right? Coaches abusing their power. You will not go to the Olympics unless you do what I say and don't tell anybody. So my work revolves mostly around a massive abuse of power on the other end of what is usually a very technically choreographed grooming process where children's minds become confused, families become groomed and confused, and it's people that they believe in their hearts they would trust. It's not the guy in a dark alley wearing a cape, raping somebody. It's the friend, the family member. We see that a lot. The doctor, the coach, the teacher, the clergy member, whatever the religion may be. When we get into adults, what's the definition of sexual abuse? It's about consent. And we've seen that play out a lot in the news. What's the definition of that? What are the boundaries? And false reporting is a big topic. We saw, a lot of that play out in the Depp v. Heard trial. And so, but for the work I do, abuse is an abuse of power, gaining access to a child sexually, often corresponding to a massive abuse of power.
And in terms of the work that you do, please indulge me here, because again, I'm going to go back to your abuse began when you were 8 years old. You've said you didn't recognize it until you were in your 30s. And according to a lot of reports, the average age of someone reporting their own past abuse is 52 years of age. And so I'm like, how are you able to have clients, for crying out loud? Because again, if they're young and they don't know and they don't really discover it or realize it until they're older, what do you do? How is it that you're able to address these issues, particularly against children when they're younger, if they don't even know most of the time what it is until they're older?
Yeah. So, I was in my 30s and I give myself zero credit. My friend, Jamie Dancher, 2000 Olympic bronze medalist, filed the first lawsuit in Nassar, which inspired the Indianapolis Star to publish this piece that I saw. And I opened it. I go, oh my God. In 1 second, I go, that's what that was. That's why I've been struggling my whole life and spent, all this time not even able to function. Like there was something wrong my entire life until my mid-30s, and I could never put my finger on what it was. So I credit someone else for coming out and saying, oh, remember that treatment? And I won't get graphic on your show.
Sure.
But if that happened to your child or my child, we would be calling the police the next second. But in our little conditioned minds, I just thought, that's what happened to everybody. That's what Larry did. That's what whatever.
Well, let me interject for a second here. If you don't want to get graphic, I understand, but don't refrain from doing so on my account. If you feel that my viewers and listeners need to know specifically the kind of things that happen, the floor is yours. Tell them.
Sure, absolutely. So Larry was a doctor of osteopathic medicine. He wasn't the stick out your tongue and let me look at your throat and take your temperature. He was an osteopath, which was very hands-on. It's based on sort of a holistic manipulation of the body. The premise is the whole body is intertwined, and they're taught different manipulation techniques, which I equate to like going to the chiropractor, right?
Okay.
And so you're laying face down on a treatment table and he's pushing on this and moving this and doing this. And there came a point where part of his treatment included the ungloved digital penetration of our vaginas and anuses under the guise of, I need to loosen this tendon, which is attached to your hip, which will help your lower back. And clitoral stimulation, going from point A to point B, just, grazing over that. And so in his medical language was very confusing and convincing. And part of me was like, oh, I guess I needed that,
Right.
and it wasn't comfortable to have a grown man touching your vagina and your anus. And it hurt,
Right.
it hurt and it was uncomfortable, but no part of my brain said red flag. I didn't know what sex was. I hadn't had sexual education. I was eight.
Right.
And when it starts when you're 8, 4 or 5 times a week, every year, by the time you're 14 and 13 and you get sex education in public school, which is basically how to put in a tampon and, when you're going to start your period, it's already too far gone. This is normal for me. I don't say everybody was getting it. It was part of a much bigger sort of full body situation. And in fact, we thought he was helping. I genuinely would have said, he has my best interest at heart. And this will blow your mind and your listeners' minds. I'm 25 years old. I'm an Ivy League graduate. I went to Columbia University. I'm in law school. I'm a high hyper achiever. For all intents and purposes, I look great from the outside in. Internally, I was a wreck. Every time I go back to East Lansing, Michigan to visit with my family, I call my good friend, the doctor, and I say, hey, let's go to lunch, Larry. Let's catch up. I'll tell you about what I'm doing. Tell me about what you're up to, going to all these Olympics. You're so fancy now. We go out to lunch. Let's go back to Michigan State University sports medicine, Sarah. Let me work on your ribs. Let me work on your lower back. Let me help.
Wow.
Let me help you. And he gives me a pair of loose shorts. And in my little brain, I put them on and the same thing happens all over again. And I walk away literally believing that he was helping me. And so if it can happen to me, and I share that story not to be, embarrassed and not to embarrass myself, I share it because I truly believe that people can look at me and say, if it can happen to her, it can happen to anybody.
Yes.
When your brain is molded, when you're a little human, before your brain is fully formed, and that's all that it is very hard to gain perspective until you are out of it. And at that age, I wasn't out of it. I was home 4 or 5 times a year. I was home for the summer. I had not exited the world, the universe of gymnastics and competitive sport and Michigan State and Nassar and Team USA. It took... then my parents moved away. I never went back. That's the only reason I never saw him up until my 30s. I had teammates who were going to him pregnant for OBGYN care, helping with their back and their sciatica, and he was still doing the same thing. It took another person's courage for me to be where I am. And I want to stress for survivors, if you don't have that other person talking about your perpetrator and giving you that platform to come forward, that's a scary thing. But we have formed sort of this community to try to make it as safe and comfortable for other people who are not sort of automatically a part of this team of women.
Did you ever get an opportunity to address him directly? And if so,
Oh,
what did you say to him?
Oh, yes. I had a very long and well thought out victim impact statement that I addressed on day one of sentencing at the end of the day. And I was standing 4 feet away, and I told him that he took something from us that we will never ever get back. Our innocence, our virginities, in a sense, right? And our chance at a normal childhood, a normal adulthood, and that, I told him we grew up together. I said, Larry, I know you from so far back. We were armed with nothing but dreams. Yeah, our coach John Gaddard dreamed of going to the Olympics. Larry dreamed of becoming a doctor at that time, much less the head of sports medicine and a 4-time Olympic team doctor. And I dreamed of becoming a doctor one day too, because he was a doctor and I wanted to be just like him. He cried, he shook his head, and his lawyer came up to me after and said, that was the worst thing he could hear. It was so hard on him. And I'm going, oh yeah, like I care, but the girl, she said he stopped even knowing who these girls were. Like he doesn't even know who these people are that are coming up to the microphone to address him. It was the girls at the beginning that he knew and loved and remembered, and that's so hard for him. Yeah, I got to say everything. I knew it was my last chance. I felt very at peace about it, and I've let it go. I forgive. I forgive, not for him, but for me and for what I carry forward in my life.
Rhetorical question, maybe. 40 years to 175 years. Did that suffice for you? Is that about right? Did he deserve the rest of his natural life in prison for all intended purposes? Are you good with that?
I'm totally good with that. Absolutely. He'll never get out. He also had 60 years on his federal child porn charges, so he'll never get out. I'm good as long as he never harms another child and never has access to another child the rest of my life. I'm good with that. But
you're on. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue. Go ahead.
Back to the sense that people don't report until they're 52 years old. That's really important to note. Some kids are capable of reporting when this happens. Some are in their 20s or 30s when the body keeps the score. So it's one thing to say we don't recognize it. We don't recognize it consciously, but something in us. And I believe this about all survivors. Nobody's like blindsided by this. It's more of when you let yourself digest what happened to you. People stuff it down with drugs, with alcohol, with eating disorders, with hypersexuality, with turning to becoming a clergy member, zero sexuality. I mean, people try everything to stuff pain down and to compartmentalize it. So people don't, the average age of reporting is 52 years old. That's statistically proven. But why is that? It's not necessarily that they don't know. It's that they either know and don't want to talk about it and want to keep putting on Band-Aids for the rest of their lives until they figure out it doesn't work, which is oftentimes middle age, right? Or they consciously haven't gone there, but then life catches up to them and the body catches up to them, and they have to go there if they have any semblance of living. But often survivors will die with this in their 50s. Or 60s. Go ahead.
You have adults, like you just pointed out, they don't know until they become adults and they separate themselves from a situation to really realize what's been transpiring. But are there traits that we should notice as adults in children that would provide some kind of indication that they're going through something like this, even if they don't know it? We should know it. Is there something that we should look for, something that we should see to make sure our daughters, our nieces, whoever they may be, our children are not subjected to this kind of heinous nonsense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this does not discriminate between genders. It is our sons too, unfortunately. Yeah, any kind of behavioral change whatsoever should be taken very seriously. A bedwetter who was not previously a bedwetter, anxiety to go to school or to play baseball or to go to gymnastics, that wasn't there before. Any adult that is paying more attention to your child, I'm not name dropping, but I'm really proud of this. Oprah Winfrey said to me, when an adult is paying more attention to your child than you are, that is a big red flag. When Larry Nassar is going, I got to keep Sarah extra because I got to help her with her back. My parents are going, oh, okay, she'll be at the gym for 7 hours today instead of 2. When an adult is paying special attention, keeping your child after school because they're the best child, keeping them, offering them, I see this all the time, offering private coaching or private tutorials for a child to help them get to the next level because they're so much more advanced than other kids. When adults are paying special attention to your child, that's a big one. Here's another big one. I think this is a big public service announcement that is a real life example.
Please.
There was a young girl, elementary, going to school, telling her teacher, my daddy is eating my cookie. And the teacher said, oh, no, whatever, let it go, let it go. The girl kept saying it. We are too shy to teach our children anatomically correct terms for penises and vaginas and breasts. And so this girl was taught that her vagina was called a cookie. And she was attempting to disclose to her teacher over and over, my daddy is eating my cookie. And the teacher blew it off. And what that does to the child's psyche, she doesn't know it's not called a cookie. And so she's saying, nobody believes me. Nobody believes me. So her, in her mind, she's going, well, I guess it must be normal, or maybe I'm wrong or something. Thankfully, in that case, the school finally did put it together because this little firecracker wasn't letting it go. And the dad was arrested and charged and thrown in prison and won't be out for a very, very long time. But we as parents or as caregivers or anybody who loves a child has a responsibility to be teaching about our vagina like it's our elbow. It's a part of our body, and we don't need to make up silly names for it because it makes disclosure that much harder.
Podcast, bar fights, taking on issues that matter. That is your podcast. It tackles the truth about sexual abuse and candid conversations with survivors and high-profile change makers. That could be self-explanatory, but I'm talking to Sarah Klein here. I'm quite sure you can elaborate a hell of a lot better than I just did. Talk to us about bar fights.
Absolutely. So I wanted to have a platform where we can have these conversations that were once taboo, where once there was a stigma, where once, people weren't talking about these things. And I want to shout from the rooftops in the sense that this stuff should not be embarrassing to talk about. It should not be taboo. Sex abuse is happening everywhere. It does not discriminate. I don't care how rich you are. I don't care where your kids go to school. I don't care where you live. I don't care where you come from, where your parents came from. It is literally happening in every community. And so what I want to do is have these uncomfortable conversations, hear from people who have been through it, who have come out, in a way that they're able to now talk about it, articulate things to make people feel less alone, to educate. And we don't just talk about sex abuse. I had Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt on my show, and she was talking about the concept of forgiveness. She wrote a New York Times bestseller called The Gift of Forgiveness, where she profiled my story, but also the stories of people who have been through all sorts of adversities in their lives. How do we forgive others? So it's a wide-ranging conversation over there on Bar Fights, but we're talking about the real stuff. We're rolling up our sleeves and getting into the gritty stuff in order to make people feel less alone, and to really have the difficult conversations that will hopefully continue to move this conversation forward.
I'm sitting here talking to a recipient of the 2018 ESPY Award. You accepted the Arthur Ashe Courage Award on behalf of yourself and hundreds of other survivors who spoke out and testified against Larry Nassar's abuse. I'm talking to the wonderful Sarah Klein, the great work that you're doing, that you continue to do. How can anybody find you who needs you, who needs to talk to you, who needs your advice, your counsel, your legal representation? How can they find you?
Well, it would be an honor to be reached out to by anybody going through this stuff. And I am so proud to be a fierce lawyer on behalf of my clients. The name of my law firm is Manly, Manly, Stewart, Stewart.com. We've represented, many Olympians, many sports figures, many high profile cases, but also just the average child who was abused by their teacher in the fourth grade. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also on Instagram at Sarah, Sarah Klein, Klein.
Sarah, I can't even put into words how wonderful it was to have this conversation with you. I've learned so much. I really, really want to thank you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. And this was very edifying, to say the least. There's so much that most of us, I think I speak on behalf of many people when I say there's so much that none of us ever knew. But obviously, we don't have that excuse anymore after listening to a conversation like this. Thank you so much.
I am so thrilled to be here with you, and I thank you in return for giving this issue such a platform. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm always here. Feel free to reach out anytime. There's always a home for you. Anytime you want.
Thank you.
Okay, you take care. All righty. Oh, baby, March basketball is here, and there's no better place to watch the action and get in on the action yourself than with FanDuel Sportsbook. This March, take your first shot at college hoops with FanDuel Sportsbook and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 on a bracket and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, that's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to point spread to that 5 versus 12 seed matchup you've been eyeing, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. There's no better place to bet on the tournament than FanDuel Sportsbook. Sign up today by going on to FanDuel.com/mercy and make every moment more with FanDuel all tournament long.
21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgaminghelp.com Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org Maryland. 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 1-800-522-4700 Wyoming or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net West Virginia.
You know me. You know I'm all about getting ahead, whether it's my career or my well-being. I'm all about the hustle, and that's why I'm getting ahead of the thinning hair with Nutrafol's whole body approach to hair growth. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, thickness, and visible scalp coverage. They go beyond genetics to multi-target the root causes of thinning, like stress and nutrition. And Lord knows I need it for all those reasons above. And you want consistent, reliable results. In a clinical study, men showed progressive improvement in hair growth and thickness after 3 and 6 months. That's why it's trusted and recommended by more than 3,000 top doctors. Plus, they don't use any ingredients I wouldn't want in or on my body. You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com/men and entering the promo code MERCY to save $15 off your first month's subscription. This is their best offer anywhere, and it's only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus, free shipping on every order. Get $15 off at Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, promo code MERCY. I'm glad she gave me the name of that law firm, Manly, Stewart, and Finaldi, representing sexual abuse survivors. Thank goodness I haven't had to deal with such a thing as it pertains to my daughters, because, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you right now, I'd be in jail. Make no mistake about that, I'd be in jail. You do something like that to my child, I'm coming for you by any means necessary. It's just the way it's going to be. And I think I speak on behalf of most parents. Most parents. And I ain't even bringing to the equation fathers with their daughters and how protective we can be. There's no question about it. I want to thank Sarah Klein again for bringing attention to this very, very pertinent issue. although that specific case may have been an anomaly, the reality of the situation is that sexual abuse, child abuse, is a very pertinent issue in our society. And even though abuse of all kinds should be eradicated to the best of our ability, I don't think I'm beyond the pale by saying special attention and special protection should be accorded to children. Because when you're a child, you don't know any better. When you're a child, the odds are stacked against you when people are not listening. You're pretty helpless. And as adults, what greater responsibility can we have on our shoulders than to be protective of our children? And I don't mean our children as in, oh, your child that you helped conceive. I'm talking about children universally being protected by us universally. If you're walking down the street and you saw somebody abusing a child, what would you do? You wouldn't stand idly by and do nothing. Most of us in our society would not do such a thing because we understand how helpless children are. And that's why I told Sarah, feel free. Don't let me stop you. I didn't want to be too invasive because I didn't know what kind of memories it would provoke. But the minute she opened the door and said that, you know what, I might not give your audience these details. I was like, oh, no. That's your choice. But if you want to let them know specifically what kind of stuff happens, feel free to let them know. And I got to tell you something right now. There's an parent out there. There isn't an individual out there who doesn't love children, who didn't hear how riveting her testimony was as she was sitting here on No Mercy talking to me about this. So I want to thank her. I want to thank all the Sarah Kleins out there who are fighting on behalf of children to get the disgusting perverts thrown behind bars for the rest of their natural lives or something close to it, like she did with Larry Nassar. And this coach, John Geddert, what she described him as being, no wonder he killed himself. He couldn't take it. But I believe there's a Lord somewhere. And if there's a Lord somewhere, there's the devil. And there's hell. And there's a special place for him too, and what he enabled. Forgiveness and all of that stuff is appropriate in some people's eyes, but that don't mean you don't deserve to pay the price that you deserve to pay. Sarah Klein believes that, and so do I. And I'm quite sure after listening to her, so do all of you. Thank goodness she's alive and well and didn't do harm to herself or anything like that because of the emotional turmoil she was forced to endure. What a brave woman. Got to give love, respect, and credit where it's due. The ESPY Awards did so for her in 2018 on behalf of herself and the hundreds of other survivors with the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. This is a reminder of specifically why she deserved it so much, as well as the rest of them. I learned a lot from my conversation with her. I hope y'all did as well. That's it for this edition of No Mercy. I'm about to sign off. I've always said you don't have to know sports to know mercy. And if there was ever a time since I started this podcast when No Mercy is an appropriate name for a podcast and it's truly applicable to a subject that's being tackled, that was the case today. Thanks again to Sarah Klein. Really appreciate it. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace and love, everybody.